So if you're in the mid market, which most of my audience is, and you're either about to enter, take a new service to market, make an acquisition, or move into a new market entirely, this should be a valuable conversation for you today. Today, I'm discussing how to use behavioral economics in your approach to pricing with Etinosa Agbonlahor, CEO of Decision Alpha. Welcome to the show, Etinosa.
Thank you for having me, Lee. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah, this is a unique one, honestly, and very interesting. I'm fascinated by it. Pricing can be very difficult to get right,
Hmm.
as you know. I mean, this is the business you're in, and especially for services that I think are innovative. You don't really have an anchor point with historical data. Uh, but if you look on the other side, where you have companies entering markets that are not so super innovative, but they have already have competitors in the landscape. Those can be difficult to price too because you're trying to distinguish yourself from your competition. So honestly, I think this is super fascinating topic. I'm super interested to jump into this, and I think what we should do is start high level and ask the question: why bring behavioral economics thinking into pricing?
I love that. Yes. Simple answer is every price is asking a customer to make a decision, right? Will you buy the price, negotiate the price, or reject it entirely? And what behavioral economics does is look into the psychology behind how people make financial decisions, right? So nobody's looking at price and evaluating it in a vacuum or evaluating relative to reference points we have in our mind. We might be experiencing things like loss aversion. We might be anchored to other numbers. Your customers are looking at your price and processing it entirely through psychological means. It's very rarely objective.
Hmm.
And so when you bring that behavioral economics framing into things, what you're saying is I acknowledge that my customers are looking at my numbers from a psychological perspective. What can I do to optimize how I frame my number so that I'm meeting my customers where they are from that psychological perspective? So
Hmm.
the very simple reason to bring behavioral economics into pricing is that it's the edge, it's the differentiation, it's what allows you to go from my price looks like what all of my competitors look like, and we try and compete on price to we have a price, the way we display it resonates with our customers, and we're seeing higher conversion rates as a result.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. The way I would say that is it's emotional. Is that
Hmm.
fair? Um,
Absolutely.
I've seen this sort of chart. It almost looks like a bell curve, but it's like a hill you have to climb emotionally to get your customer involved. And then once they are involved, maybe even to the point of sale, they will back that up with logic. So they flow down into that purchase or through the
Uh,
purchase.
So the decision is emotional first, and then
Yeah.
it's rationalized through logic. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if we're all honest, we're all consumers. We all buy this way. We don't want to be honest about certain things that we buy and them being, emotional or non emotional. But I think price is probably the thing that most people are looking at, no matter what you're buying. If you're buying a loaf of bread or you're buying a brand new vehicle
Hmm.
from a consumer standpoint. Um, but even in your role as CFO or CMO, or you're buying something on behalf of the company, um, you have emotions still involved in terms of how that's going to affect you in your role, and then what that looks like to your boss or what that looks like to your team.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, am I on the right track there?
You are absolutely. It's all there's emotions involved, but it's more than emotions. It's really more psychology. It's really more in the
Okay.
sense of you put a decision in front of somebody. For example, when you're shopping for mortgages, for example, right?
Mhm.
You might go, I'm just going to go with whatever the lowest interest rate is.
Mhm.
But you might not realize that the interest rate, the way it's been framed, if you're putting it next to yesterday's interest rate, if you're comparing it and saying, hey, we're giving you a 3.0, but just so you know, everybody else is getting a 3.5, right? Or hey, we're giving you a 3.0 because of your credit, but everyone else got a 2.9. Right away, that 3.0 looks different, right? So it's not just the emotions, it's also the psychology and that psychology of the context in which you put the price that changes the perception too. So yes, definitely emotions, but also just that psychological perspective too.
Yeah. So in that example, what I think of is getting the customer to have a deeper understanding around the decision they're making.
Mhm.
Is how does that factor in? How does understanding not just information, but understanding because mortgages is a great example because when you look at refinancing, for example, even more. It's not just buying because the emotion around buying a house, it's like can cloud maybe some of your decision, but refinancing, I've got all my stuff here. I'm literally just trying to have a better financial situation. Um, how does understanding play into that?
It depends on, I think, the if you mean how does the understanding of the numbers or how does the understanding of the entirety of
The
the situation
entirety.
play into
Yeah.
that, right? So it's interesting. One of the things that comes up, especially with refis and things like that, is a lot. It depends on what we're used to. A lot of times, people will go back to whoever they got their original mortgage with and use that
Mhm.
as their starting point for like a refinance, and that goes to the behavioral economics principle of inertia. We all, as human beings, experience what we call regret aversion, and that basically means that we would rather not change anything than change something and have it blow up in our faces, right?
Mhm.
Went to a different bank for my refi, and now I'm working with the most difficult bank I've ever worked with, and it's just a mess. Versus I went back to the same people I got my original mortgage with, and they're giving me a higher interest rate, and maybe I didn't do enough research to double check or triple check that. But
Mm.
I feel comfortable because I'm going to the same people that I worked with, you know, 5, 10, 15 years ago to
Yes.
get the mortgage, right? So you see how those behavioral quirks start to come into
Mhm.
play. It's yes, the information, but also regret aversion, inertia. Those things skew the
Mhm.
choices that we're making.
So I'm really interested to hear about your approach and your framework.
Hmm.
The way I think about it, sort of at first glance, is a lot of you talk about psychology and emotions, everything in between. The subjective nature of a purchase. I think that it has a lot to do with the way someone is raised, right, in a
Mm,
certain household, in a certain culture, in a certain country, certain part of a country, um, a certain socioeconomic status, or the background in which they had certain friends, or went about life a certain way. They had certain things that were available to them or not available to them. Then you have societal norms, more generally, that I think put pressure on as well, in terms of how we look at um, decisions that we make about certain things. Like this thing has value, this thing doesn't. Now, I don't know logically if that's true, but that's
mm,
just the way I look out into the world. It's almost unconsciously I'm applying value in a certain way that's been put
mm,
on me, where I might think this cola is better and more valuable than this one based on the ads that I've seen over the last decade, right?
mm.
Um, is it simpler than that? Is it more complex than that? Or, where do you go
It's
from there?
it's like separate, it's a little bit like separate threads, right? So when
Mhm,
you think about what is valuable to a person, yes, context, the way you've been raised, your disposition all affects what do I think is valuable. For
mhm,
example, I'm somebody who values keeping things for a very long time. So I've got like
mhm,
a workman shirt that my dad gave to me when I was in sixth grade, and I swear to God, I still have that shirt in good condition today. I just like doing things like that. That's who I
yeah,
am. But that's what I consider to be valuable. Those are my values. What we look at in a behavioral economics context is how does the context shape the decision you're going to make? So, for example, if I asked you, um, you're going to a lawyer and they tell you, hey, I charge 285 an hour. Do you
mhm,
want to work with me? Yes or no? That's a very different decision they are going to make versus, hey, I've got three different packages for your estate planning, for example. One is $1,000, one is $2,000, one is $3,000. In the first instance, you're deciding do I want to work with them, yes or no, based on the 285.
mhm,
Now that you have three packages inside in front of you, it's almost like we've decided you're going to work with me. Which of these resonates the most with you?
right,
So it's less what is absolutely what is valuable, what do you consider valuable is part of it, but it's also the way we have set up the choice in front of you is going to skew what you do, and it's going to inform those choices to one extent or another. And you can't get around it. If you're asking someone to make a choice, you're absolutely going to inform and influence how they make that choice in one way or another. That's just kind of, we call it choice architecture. You can't get around it.
yeah,
So it's really about the decisions you put in front of people and how you frame that to see what they then choose.
mhm. Yeah, I think and maybe I'm just stuck on this the understanding of value, or
Mm,
uh, the sort of premise we put on value. Because
mm.
I think in that situation with the lawyer, we go to it in large part, not wanting to pay anything because we don't really want to be here anyways, right? But let's say we're here, and I think if the lawyer frames it in a way to say, "Hey, you can pay me 285 an hour. or we can look at packages. Um, the value of this is if you don't do this, this is what you have to lose. If
Mm-hmm.
you do this, this is what you have to gain
Mm-hmm.
potentially. Now I'm looking at those as bigger numbers and bigger impact in my life, and I'm looking at the 285, and it got a lot smaller because I see the impact in that. So if there's an understanding of proper understanding of value in that whole equation.
Mm,
Um, I think that the framing of it at the sales table is the next level too, right? So if
mhm.
you come to it to say, how is this impacting me as a company? And then now let's get to what I'm actually going to buy and what that's going to cost. Um,
And that's exactly how we have it mapped out. You asked about our framework. So
yeah.
the pricing framework we use at Decision Alpha basically walks through the steps, right? The first one is what we call market monetization zones, and that's the value conversation. That is what elements of the product you offer or the service you offer can be monetized based on the fact that customers see value in it and are willing to pay for that value. So it's not just that it's valuable; it's also valuable in the sense that I'm going to pay for it. I'm willing to put something on the table in exchange for
Mhm.
it. So mapping monetization zones. Kind of the step zero to that is also understanding the organization's costs, right? What are marginal costs? What are the costs to keep the lights on? What is the cost involved in selling every piece of the service, every piece of the good, right? Those
Mhm.
two different layers of cost baked into that value conversation as well. Then we move from, okay, we understand the parts of this product or service you can monetize. We understand where you might be able to package some of these services up if you're a
Mhm.
lawyer or a professional services firm. Let's move that into doing the actual pricing research, right? Everything from we can use standard frameworks like the Van Westendam instruments. We have adapted some of those to bring it more of a debiased behavioral perspective to it. But we can use that to then go, okay, let's understand what people are willing to pay for the different elements of value that we've talked about are baked into your service.
Okay.
We do that research, it spits out like some numbers for us, demand estimation kind of baked into that to understand how might this inform and influence the volumes you see as a result if we went with this price point.
Uh-huh.
That's when we then take it into what we think is the fun part, the behavioral science part of it, behavioral economics. If we framed it this way versus that way, how many more people are likely to choose it versus the other one? What's the
Yeah.
differential, right? Is it significant, right? Is it worth doing? And to what extent can we tell you we're fairly confident this is the amount it might impact your sales if you went with this framing? Last part of that framework then is we've understood the value drivers, we've done the actual quant research, we've done the behavioral framing of it, we've done all that research. Now we want to sit down and say, what does it look like for you to evaluate pricing every so often based off of what you're shipping out, based on the value you're actually delivering? Doesn't mean you're going to change your pricing all the time, but it does mean that you were cognizant of we shipped out more features in the last 3 months than we did like 6 months ago. What might our new price point be? We're not going to change it yet. We just want to make sure that we are keeping our pricing as an intentional feature on our roadmap and not just like a reaction, right? Something the economy changes and then we freak out and we're ready to change the prices. So that's kind of the 4 step process that we go through. So
Okay.
that's where like the value starts to come in. That's how we think through all of it.
Gotcha. Can you give me an example so that we can kind of wrap our head around this in application, right? If you're taking this and applying it to a company, what is an example of what that looks like?
So it depends on where the company is in their process. There's some companies that come to us and say, we already have a price, or we are entering a new market. For example, we've been working in North Florida, we're expanding into South Florida. We just want to make sure that should we keep the pricing consistent? Should we not? That's when we might take it and do we skip step one, we jump right into let's do the monetization research. Let's do that willingness to pay research and see what are folks in South Florida willing to pay for the
Mhm.
service. How do they think about it? Are there other value drivers that they might get from your service that folks in North Florida are not getting? Right. So we do that research and then we take it into the framing. How might you frame it for these people and test that kind of A/B test that in a digital format and just come back with the results of okay, this is what people in South Florida have said they're willing to pay. This is how you want to frame the messaging of the pricing to them.
Uh-huh.
And we can talk to what a roadmap looks like for you to check this in the future. So that's one instance where they're coming to us and saying, hey, we're expanding, help us understand what to do in this new scenario.
Uh-huh.
There's been other instances where people have said, come to us and said, for example, we have always sold directly into schools. We are starting to we want to start to sell directly into individual parents, right? So we're moving from like a sort of B2B environment into a B2C environment.
Mhm.
We feel relatively comfortable about the price point we've set. We don't yet want to change the price, but can you help us have a conversation around how we should frame it for this completely different audience that we've never sold to before,
Mhm.
right? And so with that group, then it's doing that research around, do you frame it in this way? How do you use anchoring? What kind of tiers are we using? Should we be using a subscription model, or do we go, it's a flat fee or it's an annual fee, right? So we can test those different things. That's kind of what the process looks like. It depends on what the original question the client comes to us with,
Mhm.
allows us to go, okay, where in the process do we pick up and move from there?
Okay, so it sounds like, you mentioned roadmap. It sounds like you're developing pricing based on the buyer's journey. Is that correct? Like, maybe not how marketing thinks of it, but, the journey in terms of where pricing fits. I know we talked about this, on our pre-call about it being a feature, not a,
Mhm.
the whole journey. Talk to me a little bit more about that roadmap, framework.
So the roadmap is essentially, when and how often do we look at or do pricing research, right?
Okay.
When and how often do we sit down and have a conversation about what have we shipped more recently? How do customers value that? What is the number they might put around that? And that then allows us to have justification for, okay, we should talk about price increases moving forward. Or there seems to be some sort of value that customers are getting and are articulating that we've never tried to like package up before.
Mhm.
Let's see what that looks like if we wanted to surface it to the marketing, right? So it's less, this is a predefined way for you to do pricing moving forward.
Mhm.
And a lot more, okay, we're going to create this checkpoints, for lack of a better word, for when you should and what the trigger points are for you taking a closer look and doing some more pricing work.
Gotcha. This question just came to mind. I want to make sure I don't forget to ask you for I know I've talked to clients about this, in sort of tangential conversation is should companies put their pricing out publicly, like on their website,
Mm.
or should they not and have it be more of a journey of getting to pricing? That,
That's interesting. So it depends on the company, right? So tell which
yeah.
company, what kind of industry? Tell me about the company
Well,
that
the
you're
one that comes to
asking
mind
about.
is, a subscription based, and
Mhm,
you see a lot of pricing on those because they have the 3 packages or 4 packages.
mhm,
But I think it's more difficult for professional services. Like, we run an agency, and I've toyed around with putting sort of or package price on the website for certain services, or, um, pricing kind of starts at number.
mm,
Right? I eventually took it down because, you know, we're we're trying to we're trying to create a standard for our pricing for the product that we're delivering to our clients ongoing, so that we have a model that we work from. But, occasionally we have customization that has to happen. And
mhm.
so therefore I don't want to anchor them on a low number when customization usually costs more. So that's been my experience, but I think for a SaaS subscription, it makes sense to put a lot of your pricing out publicly. But for services or tech, maybe there's more
Mm.
customization involved, so it wouldn't make sense to have it publicly. What do you think?
I was gonna ask, when you had the price on the website, did you find that prospects were coming to you and expecting that that number you had on the website was the max versus it being like a floor? Did they look at that number as like, this is the ceiling versus the floor?
I don't know because the number of conversations we had in between adding it to the website and then taking it down,
Mm,
it didn't seem like they really did that deep of a search on the site
mhm,
to make, it's more of like, they see our presence. A lot of our business comes through referral. They may not even gone to our website, honestly, because it's not a decision point. It's more of a relationship type of thing that we're doing because of the service we're offering, which is a lot of podcasting and video, is a lot of relationship type of
mhm,
work.
mhm,
So, I've also noticed that people buy, um, in light of what you're selling or in light of what they're getting. They might buy a different way from buying legal services versus medical services, or and list goes on. I don't know if that helps.
That does help because what I was going to say is that sometimes people will avoid, and sometimes we recommend don't put the price, don't make it visible because if the customer is going to come to you and it requires a high amount of specialization,
Mhm,
you're going to have to customize features to them. All the work you do is unique to them. For example, we don't have pricing on our website because every client we work with is different, right? The pricing framework we use, the methodologies might be the same, but where they come in, how much complexity is involved, how many products are they
mhm,
acquiring, transitioning, all of that affects the amount of work that we're going to put in and what that might
mhm,
look like, right? So it would be remiss of us to say, oh, the pricing is at this point, right? Um, I do think that whether you show it or not, it really depends on the kind of company that you run and and the kinds of customers you're appealing to, right? So if you are appealing to more of a utilitarian, hey, this is a cheap, easy, simple product. There's not a lot of work involved in it. You can pick it up, use it. You know, it's a simple tool. It's online. Grab it and go. If you have any questions, we have FAQs for you.
mhm,
In those instances, maybe it makes sense to have the price invisible. You're reducing friction because the people you're appealing to and the
mhm.
kinds of buying conditions you're trying to appeal to is a low friction, easy decision. Try it. If you love it, stick with us. Right. In
Yes.
those instances, transparency is very useful. Put the
Mhm,
price up. In other instances where it's what we do is highly tactile, it is very much tailored to you and the work you're doing. The consideration is either we don't have the pricing up, or we have numbers, or we have ranges. Hey, the work is going to start at this. Or an average customer who does this kind of project usually ends up spending about this much, right? The only issue with having pricing up on your website is that customers will anchor to it, meaning eventually somebody's going to see it, it's going to stick in their minds that this is what you cost. And so if they come to you and you're significantly higher than the price on your website, it's an issue.
mhm,
You have the price on the website, you're ready to change and raise your prices. It just becomes a little bit more complex,
mhm.
right? So in general, I think it depends on the kind of product that you're offering, the kind of service that you're offering, and your ideal buyer type. If it's low friction, go for it, put it on the website. If it's highly customized, you need to have a conversation. It's probably best to not to have it, in the conversation and the proposal you send to them.
Yeah, makes sense. And what we did was we took it off and we just put it in our sales process where, in the end of the first conversation, if it makes sense, or the first of the second conversation, because we usually have 3 or 4 conversations
Mm,
to proposal. We usually give them a range based on now the conversation we're having and
yeah,
services we can provide, and that anchors them on that top end of the range.
yeah,
So that when we come back, we can say, "Yeah, it is that," or it is actually gonna be less.
yeah.
Um,
And we do something similar. We give a range.
mhm,
You know, the floor is here, or like the base cost of us entering the building basically is it's going to look like this, and then
mhm,
everything from there might go up to here, and it usually comes in between that.
yes. Okay, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about, um, how to set pricing or adjust pricing based on external pressures. So, a lot of what we've been talking about so far is
Mm,
going into new markets. These are, you know, proactive things that we're doing as a company, and we need to be thoughtful about those things. But if we have tariffs that come into place, or we have inflation, we're experiencing both of those. A lot of businesses are experiencing more than others. How do you, we can look at different kinds of businesses here in a minute specifically, but like it's going to be different for restaurants. Inflation, food prices go up. It's hard for, I mean, I know some people that own restaurants, and they have a lot of trepidation over raising their prices because they don't wanna lose their customers, but they have to in order to make any money because the food costs have gone up. So, talk to us about raising prices in the midst of all of these different
mm.
changes and these external pressures.
And let's separate those into two things. I want to talk about raising prices, but I also want to talk about this is one of the pitfalls of doing cost plus pricing,
Okay.
right? Where you go, this is what our costs are, these are the margins that are standard for our industry, or these are the benchmarks, and so we're going to do cost plus margin
Mhm,
equals what the price should be.
mhm,
Because costs, we assume, we pretend that costs are a fixed thing, they're an assumption, right? Anything can change costs at any point, meaning
mhm,
that if we went into our business, we set up a restaurant and we said, okay, the price of raw ingredients is this, price of delivery is this, the supplier's fees are this, tariffs come, everything changes. Now, all of the assumptions we baked into our models no longer hold, and now we're running helter skelter trying to figure out
mhm,
what needs to give, right? It's kind of the advantage of starting with rather than starting with what does it cost and what's the margin, you start with how does a customer view this? What is their perceived value for this? What are they willing to pay for it? So that you're not pricing a dish at $23, whereas the neighborhood that you are, customers are perfectly willing to pay $32 for it, and they're not going to bite an eyelid at it,
Uh-huh.
right? So it's kind of one of the reasons we're so emphatic about cost plus can work if you're very, very sure about the cost and you're very sure that you've got contingencies for any of the different things that might happen to affect those costs.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's very sensible to just start by understanding how does your customer perceive the value of your different offerings? What is they willing to pay for it? And let's move in that direction, right? So that's the first thing. Just wanted to call that out around cost plus pricing.
Sure.
Um, and then the second is how do you raise prices? This is really interesting because we have a pricing playbook. It's free online. Folks can download it. But in there, we have a couple of price raising scripts. And it's kind of in the context of like SaaS, you've shipped more features. How do you talk about that? But the principles are the same regardless of whatever business or industry you are, right? A lot of times we see people try and raise prices by sending this big, weird, convoluted message out to customers. It's both apologetic and it's not quite confident, and so it ends up being this like big mess of
Yes.
text. I recently, one of the neobanks I work with raised their prices and sent out this just garbled, and I had to respond back and be like, hey, so like help me explain what this means for me. And I'm sure a lot of their customers did that, so they probably wasted a bunch of time in FTE just dealing with customer responses clarifying the price raise.
Yeah.
Here's how to raise prices properly. First one is there should be why are we raising the prices? Have we delivered new value to you? Are we doing things faster, better? Have we made your life easier? Have we saved you more money in the last 3 months? What is the premise of this price increase? To some extent, people understand, and given the macroeconomic environment that we're in, customers understand that, hey, things are changing. And so people necessarily, if you say I'm raising prices because the economy has changed, I think people are okay with that. But it's usually better to say I'm raising prices because we built all of these great new features and we're making them available to you. And so because we're delivering new value to you, this is what this is what the price is going to look like. This is what the value exchange is going to look like moving forward. So it's premised on tell everybody all of the new value delivered to them, first of all. Second one is then be very clear and very confident around what is the new pricing? What does it look like? Who's paying what and why? And then the third thing is help your current customers understand, are they grandfathered in? Are they on a glide path? Are prices going to change for everybody tomorrow? Are they not going to change for another 3 months? Which we recommend. Give people a bit of a heads up, kind of get them accustomed and acclimated to the fact that there's new price coming. And then when the price does come, you see less reactance baked into that because you give them a
Mhm.
bit of a heads up. But basically, it's those three steps. What is the new value? What is the new price point? And also, how quickly is it going to go into effect, right? Is it tomorrow? Is it 3 months? Be clear about that.
Uh-huh.
So the fact is that in our environment, people are accustomed to the fact that prices will rise, right? Netflix changes its pricing all the time, right? Nobody like flips the table.
Yeah.
We've all been trained by these big companies to expect that prices will increase. And so when it comes to your turn, there's no reason to assume that if you carry out the price raise effectively, if you're very clear and you're very confident and you're very fair about how you're raising prices, you will lose all your customers. That's not the case.
Yeah, and I think that's a big fear, especially when you're removed from the customer and you're not communicating with them
Yeah.
on a day-to-day basis. Because what I hear you really saying undertone is communication is really important, and from a marketing standpoint, you should be always getting feedback to learn all the things, how to do better marketing, how to communicate even better, and sort of cyclical effect. Which a lot of good marketing just goes back to being a good human and looking at relationships. In a meaningful way. And I think communication is a big piece of that.
Yes, absolutely. The other thing that's interesting is I don't know if you know TransferWise. They are well, I guess they're called Wise now, but they're good for like if you for transferring money across the world.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I have
because
heard of them actually. Yeah.
and because they're always working with these different exchange rates and they're able to like
Mhm.
go to different exchanges and get better rates, whenever they're able to secure a slightly lower rate, they will send an email to everybody and say, good news. The cost of, changing euros has gone down by like 23 pence or
Mhm.
whatever, right? if there's instances where it makes sense, where you're able to create cost savings for your customers, it also absolutely makes sense to go to them and say, hey, the price of doing this has gone down slightly. Now, for TransferWise, I'm sure that their margins are healthy and they're not losing money on the fact that the price has gone down.
Yeah.
But if you're also able to do engender cost savings for your customers, you should absolutely also be going back to them with that transparency and saying, hey, it's a little bit cheaper for you now. You're welcome, right? Because then there'll be days when you have to go, hey, and now it's more expensive, just so you know. So you're creating that
Yeah.
goodwill to your point. You're keeping that communication going. And there's research from the behavioral sciences. Ryan Beale at Harvard did this research that basically showed operational effect, transparency, it drives more trust. So when you
Mhm.
can say to your customers, here's what's going on in the back end, right? Here's how we're thinking about it. Here's what it looks like. They trust you more. They're going to spend more with you. There's a higher feelings of this is a company I want to work with, more of that halo effect.
'Cause they feel closer.
Yeah, you've let them into what's going on.
Yeah.
It's not a black box. You're not some cold company just doing stuff. You're people building something that you want them to like.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. In that case of the company constantly, as much as they can, telling their customers, "Hey, good news." Whenever they have, let's say, bad news where the price has gone up, do they reference? Is it good practice to reference all the good news before and say, "Hey," yeah, or do they just say, "Hey, here's the bad news," and that not in that those terms, but
It's more or less, hey, due to macroeconomic conditions, and I'm paraphrasing here, but hey, due to macroeconomic conditions, cost of the, I don't know, pesos has gone up a little bit.
yeah,
So, that's what it's going to look like. But we are always working very hard to try and get it down for you, and we'll keep you posted. And we believe them when they say that because they have told us
yeah,
in times when they have, created savings for us. So
huh.
it's that way of, it's that level of transparency, right?
Yeah, it's that's really interesting. I think we've gotten to a more depthful part of the conversation there because a lot of it seems to me a lot of the psychology of it is building, establishing trust, calling on that trust,
Hmm.
and referencing that trust. And when I think about like the arc of our conversation about the different things we've talked about, it really does come down to trust. That's where a lot of value is built around as well. We find value in things or people, companies we can trust. In most, I would say, in part, but in most part, um, it seems like that's the core, the kind of nucleus to the whole thing is if you are seeking to genuinely build trust, understanding your customer,
Hmm.
um, and communicating that over time, then you should be in a pretty good spot because they'll see the sincerity in the communication. And if you kind of do what you say you're going to do, in this case, the trust will be there whenever the bad news comes.
Yes, and that's what makes it so interesting for the middle market companies. Because if you, let's say you're acquiring a new company, right? You bought on a new company that has a great feature that you want to incorporate into your tech.
Hmm.
All of the customers of that company that has been acquired, they don't know you and they don't like you, and they're worried they're going to change everything for them,
Yes.
right? So there's massive loss aversion coming into the gate, and that's when you see there's a stat that about 70 to 90% of M&As are not super successful, or they're not successful based on the terms they had set out. Part of that is the leakage of pricing and leakage of like trust. People see big company acquired this smaller company that we love, and now they're going to just mess everything up, and we're going to start looking for alternatives right away, right? We don't even want to wait and see what they're going to do before we abandon ship. And so, as a big company, it's incumbent or is like the weight is upon you to reach out to those customers and kind of decide, right? What is the vision? Is it that we're going to integrate this new feature or company we bought fully into our stack, right, and merge them? In which case, we're being very transparent about this is the vision that we have for this new company we've acquired. We're going to do the research and talk to the customers of those companies to understand what is the value you got from it. What was the price point? What would you be willing to pay for it if you came into our ecosystem? How do you perceive that? Like, have that conversations with those customers you've acquired,
Mm.
because then that helps you make and create a strategy that's going to work and help you either retain the customers you want to retain or be very clear cut about, hey, this is what it's going to look like moving forward. And you can stay with us or you can transition, but you know what to expect. And we don't trigger that loss aversion in you.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. This is great. I like this. As we wrap up and we're in like the last 5 or 10 minutes of our conversation, I wanted to spend some time Either looking at your case studies, digging into companies you've worked with if you have an interesting story that has application there, or just kind of a hypothetical. I thought, large part of our audience is B2B founder CEOs. So looking at a B2B company, whether it's professional services, SaaS, tech, manufacturing, construction, whatever, um, which way do you want to go? I mean, do you have something that's top of mind that we could dig into, or do we need to create a hypothetical?
I have something we could dig into, but I think it might be fun if you toss up a hypothetical and then let's play with it.
Okay, let's do it. So, of those categories, professional services, SaaS, tech, manufacturing, I'll tell you what company I've been talking to lately um, is a tech company, and they build robots that automate warehouse floors. So, you think of Amazon. We've seen these documentaries and stuff. That's how we all, as a public, know that this is happening. But they do that with other companies, and that's a world that I'm very not close to. There's a manufacturing component because they have to manufacture these robots, and then they have to sell the tech. I'll call the whole thing tech, right? Because there's AI, there's mechanical parts, but it's all pretty much tech. They have to sell it through to their client with a process and an infrastructure, and there's a lot of components that go into it. Where do you even start with pricing something like that? I mean, in a little bit of research I've done, I see that there are a number of competitors in that space. So
Mhm.
there is a point there is a historical pricing in which to think about um, anchoring for building your model. But the nature of this is very innovative as well. If you have a better robot or a better system that the robot follows, et cetera, that could be really tricky to price because of the innovation of it all. Um, would you start by saying, okay, we're gonna not have not the typical loss leader, but start by saying, okay, we get investment, we're gonna start building this out, and we have a guinea pig, client that's gonna let us come in and work on their stuff. Um, and you price it to the best of your ability, and you kind of figure out your pricing as you go based on historical data and based on where you think the value really is with the
Mhm.
innovation. Or how do you approach pricing?
Yes. So in that kind of instance, what I'm hearing is that there could be multiple use cases for that,
Hmm.
right? And so
Yes,
you
there
want to
are.
start by bundling up the different use cases.
Okay.
Because if I'm selling into Amazon, pricing and process is going to look very different than if I'm selling to, I don't know, a school district so they can automate delivering trays or to
Yes.
the kids, right? Looks
Yes.
very, very different. So we want to start by just mapping out and being, this is the mapping monetization zones. Who are the different use cases for
Yeah.
this,
Okay.
right? And where do we want to lean into? This is a power of doing proof of concepts because you do your proof of concept and you get a couple of different distinct user segments or user types that make you go, okay, we really enjoyed working with like the Amazon type and they seemed they had more of a demand. They could integrate us more finely. Maybe we concentrate on that first.
Hmm.
Or just enjoyed working with the school district or the restaurants and
Sure.
using nobody else is doing
Well,
what we're doing. There's a
you might
Go ahead.
sell contracts through, so you have business and you follow that lead.
Yes, exactly. So you're deciding what are the different use cases, what are different monetization zones, and then let's lean into and understand that each one might look different from a price point perspective. But let's assume we've got those three use cases, right? You can sell into like the warehouse side of things. You can sell into, let's say, hospitals as well, delivering medicines. If
Mhm.
you know, on the floor, surgery tools in the surgery room,
Sure.
and trays to kids in schools. Let's
Mhm.
assume that those are realistic use cases.
Yes.
Want to take all of those and go, okay, now we're going to go do the willingness to pay research, right? Again, this assumes that you understand this is the cost to assemble a basic unit. And this is what it looks like to sell into each of those three, right? It costs an additional XYZ manpower, XYZ in terms of the sales team times, XYZ to mock up a demo. This is what it costs for every time we sell successfully.
Mhm.
This is what it costs us to do that, just so you have your costs laid out, right? We're going to go now and go, okay, let's do the willingness to pay research. We're going to talk to, for use case one, all of your potential Amazon, either the customers you already have or the prospects you already have, and understand what are the value drivers. What would you be doing if you weren't using this service? You might say, well, we would hire a lot of part time staff to work on the warehouses. Okay, what is the cost of that to you, right? How much have you been investing in that? And
Mhm.
what does the solution replace for you? What are the other things that you had been doing that this replaces? Well, it's a lot of work to like oversee all of the staff. Okay, so we're replacing some of the admin costs as well. Are there subjective and psychological costs that this thing does or takes off of your shoulders as well? You're using that to try and start to understand and break out what are the value drivers, what matters, right?
Mhm.
What does this tool do and serve the functions it serves for that use case? We're going to take those drivers and do the willingness to pay research, the quant retention. Like, okay, for this thing, what would you pay for it? Was too high? Was too low? How might you frame it, etc. Do that. It's going to generate some ranges for us, and then that's what we take and go. Okay, if we use this range, would demand go up? Would it go down? What are some benchmarks we can compare it to? Or given that it's so innovative and we don't know yet, let's just take the range and drive it straight into the behavioral science framing of it.
Mhm.
What if we said, uh, given this is a big company and they're going to want to order tens of thousands per warehouse, what if we just did it per robot and that's the price?
Mhm.
Right? Or do we go more innovative and say, since you're used to thinking about things in terms of FTE and manpower hours, what if we say we're going to sell you this technology as you pay a fee for the technology, but then you also pay a fee for the amount of manpower hours that the tech gives to you, right? So you use our tech for 15 hours, you pay for 15 hours, or you buy a block of $10,000 worth of hours or 10,000 hours for the robot, right? So you're paying for the functionality itself or for the tool itself, and then you're paying for like the hours of work that the tool does for you.
Mhm.
Right? We get innovative and creative with how we frame up and what we shape up that pricing package to look like. And then we test that and see what resonated well with our audience, what did not, and we translate that, right? So that's one case of big complex product, but we can break it up into the different use cases. You can do the research for
Mhm.
each one, we can do the framing for each one, and then you come back and you've got options for your client.
I like that. And then as you get to the end piece there, where you're creating the packages or you're separating out the layers of what's being offered or delivered for what price. Um, when you're at that stage, are you thinking about the value that where are you like sitting mostly in your mind as far as setting pricing structure? Are you thinking about the value that's created in the metrics that are moved by the client? Like for example, with Amazon case, like more efficiency, less time for product to go in package. Those kind of there's a lot more metrics than that, but all the metrics that are you looking at those and saying we're impacting these in this positive ways, so therefore that's driving the value of these maybe three layers that we're offering, whether it's mechanics, people, technology.
So in step two, when we're talking about what were the different value drivers your customer perceived, we're doing the research on each one of those drivers to understand what they'd be willing to pay for. And so you have a map of, we think about this in terms of manpower and manpower hours, but they really value the fact that like it's safer to have robots on the floor than to have people on the floor. And we don't
Mhm.
have as much compliance associated with that. So maybe we like bake that into how we think about packaging this up, right?
Mhm.
All the value drivers you did in step two when you're actually talking to customers is what then feeds into the creativity that goes with forming and shaping up the packages.
I like that a lot, and it really gets back to positioning too, because in the
Mm,
macro conversation, you're taking this value set that let's say we build our pricing around safety because we know that's the impact that's really happening, and then they have these other values that come that can influence and definitely give you a position in the market to be the
mhm.
company who's about safety, and you can build everything around that. So I like that. I think pricing to some extent is the pointy end of the spear, and if you can map that to value, and then you get all the rest of it that comes with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a good analogy for it. Yeah.
Let's do one more real quick because it came to mind when you were talking about separating use cases. There's a lot of companies out there that do RFPs, or RFQs, and they don't really have another way to do it.
Mm,
They just in certain industries where they have to sell through a proposal or some type of a bureaucratic type of system.
mm.
One I'm thinking of is a company that sells chicken product through to schools because you mentioned the
Mm.
schools. And I thought I may maybe think of it where they're selling through. That's one of their sectors is education.
Yeah.
They have to go through an RFP process and they have to be a preferred vendor, and then you actually get to the end of the. How
Mm.
do you think about pricing in a world where it could potentially be just about the lowest price. That's how they make
Yeah.
a decision.
And that's the tricky thing about working in that RFP space is oftentimes your buyer is big enough that they're making demands to you and they're looking for lowest best intersection of lowest best fastest, right? Which is
Yes.
the unicorn that doesn't necessarily always exist. So I don't necessarily know that there's a lot that you can do in terms of optimizing pricing if you're in an RFP space. What you might be able to do is say, these are other elements of value that we can deliver, right? It's still a little bit tricky. It's almost like once you've acquired the customer, then you can go do some of that research with them. And next time there's an RFP, you're better positioned to say and speak to these elements of value that you haven't asked for in the RFP, but this is how we think about it. This is why you should work with us. This is what that looks like. Um, but just responding to an RFP, it often is just how low can you go and how
Yeah. That's
quickly,
the case
right?
for cost plus and, the
Yeah.
brother-in-law effect. However many people you can be their brother-in-law, then, that's that many you can sell.
Yep. That it's helpful to make a lot of friends if that's the game you're playing. Yeah.
That's right. A lot of behind the scenes deals, cash deals.
Handshakes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on. Just say a few things about who you are, your company, Decision Alpha,
Hmm.
and kind of who you guys work with. Talk about your company.
Yes. Thank you, Lee. Enjoyed the conversation. So Decision Alpha, we are a pricing and monetization firm. What we do is we help companies increase profitability by optimizing their pricing. Usually the companies that we're working with are in some sort of transition. So they've just acquired a new company, they're expanding into a new market, they're building up a new product. We love product research. Um, but anything in that vein where there's a transition and they're trying to understand how do we make sure that we're optimizing our profitability by getting our pricing right, our edge is behavioral economics. We understand how customers make financial decisions. We do that customer research and we bring that to bear. So you're not just working from a quant model, you also have that deep qualitative and psychological
Mhm.
perspective to create a price that's going to resonate with your customers and drive higher or faster conversion rates. So that's who we are. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have like a free pricing playbook. If people are interested in that, it's at playbook.decisionalpha.co. And you can download that, take a look at that, and you're welcome to reach out to us with any pricing questions.
That's awesome. Thanks for that. And if people want to get in touch with you, should we send them to LinkedIn or where else?
All right, they can email me directly.
Okay,
It's just my name, Etiosa A at decisionalpha.co.
awesome. Thanks for the conversation. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate it.